Hannah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ryan.
I am super excited to have you in the show because we have one of my favorite heroes that gave us the introduction, Sherry Deutschman out of Nashville. I met her a couple of years ago at EY. She's got one of the most amazing stories about how she shared it with her employees and what she'd gone through and what she'd built. And the fact that you guys are good friends just means a lot. So I'm excited.
Oh, yes. She's one of my favorite heroes, too, for sure.
Yeah, so hopefully we can both hold up to her introduction here. So,
I don't know.
It was pretty cool because you had just written a very nice article on LinkedIn that pretty much summarizes what I think we're going to be getting into today. So I can tell that you've been processing your exit over the last few years, and so Anna, maybe I'd like to start with our guests, is for the listeners, like how did you? Was it an accident that you became an entrepreneur? How did you decide to start your company, and kind of where did it really come from?
Sure. Thanks for asking. So I thought that I was unique because I did not start my business on purpose. It was quite accidental. But then over the years, I found out that that's not very unique. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs kind of happen into their business, after either doing something they really love or doing something they really hate. And for me, I had soul-sucking jobs for the first, 20 years that I was working almost. And fortunately got rescued by the dot-com era in the late 90s and recruited into an early stage dot-com that was very successful. It had venture capital money. It's called citysearch.com. So I got to work on one of the beta markets, which was Nashville, my hometown. And it was a wonderful time. It didn't matter that I didn't have a degree of any kind from college. And it didn't matter that the time that I was in college, I spent studying classical piano. And it didn't matter that I'd never had a business course or marketing class because nobody knew anything about digital. It was totally a level playing field.
Crazy.
So somehow I understood that company very organically from the beginning, and I got the position that was very visible in the marketplace. I was the marketing director. So that's how I learned it. And we had a good 3 years before going public and being bought by Ticketmaster first and then going public. And then my only choices were if I was going to stay with the company, was to move to a major market. But I was single and I had teenagers at the time, and I just could not do it. So I worked through 2 years of just like continuously losing my job because the dot-com bubble burst right after I left CitySearch. And even though I could get a job in Nashville, you couldn't keep jobs because companies just were going out of business like crazy. That happened 4 times in 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So the good thing was that every time I changed jobs, I made $20,000 more. So it was the weirdest time because I'd be like, great, I just lost my job again. It means I'm going to get a raise.
So even though the company was going out of business, you would then go somewhere else and get a.
I made more money.
Not a bad strategy.
It was really odd, So by the time I really realized I had lost my mind after the 4th time, and I sort of looked around and thought, wait a minute, I am the only breadwinner in the family, So why would I risk my career when the only people who were calling me by that time were 27-year-olds with a great idea, and they should all be working for me, So I decided to just take a contract. It was actually a contract that I had pitched with my last job, and then the company, they accepted, and then the company went under. I was like, well, I could do this. I can do this little project. It's just a small website. And that's how I got started. And after, a handful of months, one of my clients said to me, because then I started getting contracts crazy. Like I got 6 contracts in 2 weeks and totally replaced my the highest salary I'd ever had in a job. And,
oh, wow.
And then after a few months, one of my clients said, you're going to need some help. I mean, because you're going to be successful, you're going to need some help. And he made a recommendation of somebody I should hire part-time, and I did. And then eventually I hired a designer and a developer, and you can't just have one. So then you have to get an office, So that's how it started. But I literally was probably 6 years before I really realized I had started a company. And what happened that day when I realized it was that I had to sign a lease on a copier machine. And no.
Yes.
So we had an office. I had signed a lease for an office. I don't know why that wasn't my cue that I had a business, but it was the copier machine that made me feel like I had a real company. I don't really get that, but
because that was my old industry. We probably forced you to sign some 5-year death clause of canceling the copier contract.
Yeah, I think the copier contract sort of feels like it's like Hotel California. Like you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave.
Oh, that's super funny. What kind of work were you doing? Were you guys doing actually like like building websites, or were you doing like design?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we were building websites. We were designing them and building them, and then we would run media campaigns. Because you got to remember, this was like 2002 when I started, so that was before the iPhone. It was before Google had a revenue stream. It was before Facebook was open to anybody outside of college students. It was before email service providers were available to everybody. It was before everything.
Mm-hmm.
So for those first several years, we got to try a lot of things for our clients, and we used to laugh about the fact that for years, every time I sold something, we had actually never done it before.
Like the 3M model. Where's our revenue coming from? We're not sure yet.
We're not sure. Exactly. So it was sort of a joke, because I would come back and I would say to the staff, I'd say, "Hey, we're going to do such and such," and they would all like look at me like with big eyes, as if I had shown this big spotlight in their face. They were like, "What? Like, we never done it." I was like, "Oh no, it's easy. We can do it." And we did. And also for the first several years, every time we ran a digital media campaign of any kind for our clients, it was the first time they had ever done it.
Oh, that's crazy.
So,
what was it like during that time before you signed the copy release? Like were you juggling cash flow? I mean, like, and just because I think there's this big, and I don't know where in your journey where, the owner's got a job, you're essentially just living off the float, in a paycheck, versus like, okay, you're hiring, you're building infrastructure. I mean, like, what was it like? And then how did that line up in your timeline?
It was perfect, because we never had a cash flow problem. We had cash flow from the beginning. We had profit from the beginning. I didn't really have to look at my financials very much for the first 5 years or so. And I know that that's unreasonable for most people, because there's a lot of small companies that I know now who are really struggling with that. But back then, for some reason, it wasn't a problem. And we were growing. I mean, it was first me, and then after about a year or two, there were 3 of us, and then the next year there were 6, and the next year there were 12. We literally were doubling, almost every year. And
interesting. So how big were you?
It was crazy.
How big were you guys when you actually signed the copier contract?
We probably had 15. Okay. Probably had 15 people.
So what was as you were growing and doubling? I mean, what was your overall thought and perception of, because in your article you're talking about like head down versus looking up, and you're kind of like, what was the thing that you were chasing? I mean, was it just like, was it new project, was it new shiny things, like was there like some bigger thing that you were marching towards, and how did that change when you started to look at the fact you had a company?
Yeah, so there was never something bigger that I was chasing. There was so much opportunity in the marketplace, literally so much opportunity. We were just one meeting to the next. We closed almost everything we sold. There weren't very many of us out here at that time, 2002, 2003. I don't even think we knew that we were a digital agency, because I had never worked for an agency before, so I didn't know what the agency model was. And there was not a delineation between development shops and agencies and creative shops as much in digital as there was in traditional advertising, because it was all just emerging. When you're working for an emerging industry like that, nobody knows what they really are, and so nobody knows what they aren't also.
Nope.
So that's a really good quote right there.
Right. So
anyway, I was just, what my thought was that I was not afraid. I was never afraid, because there was so much business. I mean, we were just in such high demand. So I think that's good. And I also think that there's always a flip side to everything. So I think the flip side of that is that maybe you don't grow as intentionally, and maybe it kept me so busy that I didn't pay attention to what I was building and really think, is this what I want to build or not? And could I build something that's either more marketable when I'm ready to exit, or that gives me more choices when I'm ready to exit, rather than just sell or close?
Mm-hmm. So, like, was there a time or a place or like a specific event, Hannah, that like as you were growing? I can only imagine how fun that'd be to close everything that you came across, because like I'd enjoy that problem. And it's so funny because when I started in the family business, that's kind of how the copiers were back around the same time. And then all of a sudden, like it changes. Was there something, a time, place, or event where like it's became less fun, or like how like that you started looking at something differently because as you're
Oh,
going?
definitely.
That sounds like an
Yeah.
absolute lot of fun. It sounds like a blast. So how did things shift?
Yeah. Of course. And this is actually what I'm writing a book about. So I'm writing about why you sell a company that you started and that you love. It's not the how-to, because there's a whole lot of how-to books. But I'm writing about what happens to you in the process of business ownership that makes you ready to sell it. And it's painful. It's just my premise is that you become ready to sell your business, because business ownership is a series of losses. So while you're gaining all the time, you're cash flow positive, you're making money, you've got good relationships, you're putting good product out there, you also are losing. If you build a company right, the CEO is continually shedding responsibility. And a lot of the responsibility that you shed is stuff that you really enjoy doing. But you have to shed it in order to grow a leadership team so that you can have a sustainable company. But then you start to lose your best employees because competition is rampant. And especially in our space, they can go anywhere, because when we started, nobody knew what digital was. Well, when I sold it, everybody needed our digital talent.
Mm-hmm.
And so the competition isn't just coming from other agencies, it's coming from every business that's out there. Every business needs a developer.
Yeah.
Every business needs people who understand social. So the competition's huge. So you start losing your people, and then you start losing your clients, and you realize that good work and honest ethical behavior and great results are not enough to keep the client.
Yeah, it's a true, it's in the hyper competitive world today. I see that in every single customer and client or anybody that I work with. It's intense competition out there. So when you're talking about it, I like how you use the word shed, and I really did, like, because you said it's a series of stages. So where were you when you decided, like, or when you experienced that your relationship with your business was different? Because I just see this so many times where, like, and I don't know if you talk about this in your book, but like the intertwine, how intertwined your personality is and identity.
Yeah.
And your personal finance. I actually had a guy that he said that it's like it's a surgical maneuver to remove your company from you. And I'm like,
it really is. Totally agree with that. So where was I when I realized I was ready?
Or like when you looked at your business different, because like I've tried to I've tried to pinpoint this as right before you and I got on the show, that I was trying to as we're marketing our services and trying to like essentially wave the flag and say, hey, everybody, think about this before, emotionally and financially. It's like, but I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm like, well, that's it's all on someone that's unhealthy, quit smoking or quit being obese, even though like they're headed straight for the cancer train, you know what I mean? But you're trying to save them, they're not listening. And so like I kind of call it like, so I guess what I'm asking is, when you're kind of going through that realization phase, or like you're going from 2-dimensional thinking to 3-dimensional, what triggered that for you to say, okay, I get this, and it's a little bit different than I thought before?
It was a very specific event. We, although there's a lot of smaller events that lead up to this, the pain and the loss that I just mentioned, and just the continual churn of clients and employees, it will wear you out. It will just wear you out. The clients and employees' demands, especially the employees' demands, will just wear you out. But this one specific event happened that really changed me. And then it happened again a year later. We moved into a really great office downtown at November 1st of 2013. We had a good office before, not very far away, but we had outgrown it. And we'd gone through this process of of building out this office, just absolutely brand consistent, beautiful place. It's on the corner, the most important corner downtown, and my name is at the top of the building in lights. And it was a huge move for us. And the very day that we moved in, I got the phone call from our largest client that we were losing them.
Oh, no. Oh, my gosh.
Now, we were not supposed to lose them. They were in a mandated RFP. It was a government entity. And we had been told that we were safe. So we were completely blindsided. And then 1 year later, it happened again with the client that was, at that time, our biggest client. Now, granted, the first time we had had that client for 7 years, and the second client we had had for 5 years. But in both cases, we had been asked to gear up to take on more work, but ended up losing
Oh, my gosh.
everything. And so that will drive you mad right there.
No kidding. What percentage of revenue were both those clients at the time?
The first one was probably 18 to 20%. We never had a client concentration problem, so we never had anybody over 20%. So I can't tell you for sure, but it was probably in the 18 to 20% range. And the same the second time. So you're talking about losing about half of your revenue in a 2-year period.
Did you just like
in a 1-year period, actually?
Right. Did you just immediately look at that sign that had your name on it and like think about all the staffing and just like run through?
I did.
Yeah. And you're like, oh my God.
So somebody asked me one time after that sign was on the building, and before all of this happened, somebody asked me, I said, do you ever sit here and look at that sign and feel like, boy, I really made it? And I said, no. I look at that sign and I think the sign itself cost $26,000. And I have a $2.5 million operating budget and 30 people who work for me. And I just, with clients who don't sign long-term contracts with you.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the biggest problem with small business, and that's not just agency business. I think it's this way in many, maybe all businesses, is that the small business owner is expected to build a business with an entire infrastructure that will support their clients' wildest dreams, and the client doesn't make a commitment back to the agency.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I get it.
So you realize when you lose those clients and you lose those employees, especially the key employees, but any employee almost, that you are the only person in the whole ecosystem that you've set up. You're the only person who is committed. And that hurts.
Yeah.
Because while clients who stay with you are rare, good clients who stay with you are even more rare. And employees, they are, especially in my industry, they're in a very transitional time in their lives. These are, for many of them, it was their first or second job. Many of them their first job out of college. And so you shouldn't expect them to stay. And yet, you do a lot to try to help them grow and enable them, and they do good work for you. And then you realize that they're all going to leave. They're all going to leave. So they have no commitment to you, and your clients don't have any commitment to you. And yet you have committed, your personal finances, your name, all of your time, too much of your time, to build a business that you're the only person that's committed to. And it hurts.
I was going to say, and like, what did you do and where were you when you felt, I've been there, like you feel like super alone. What turned you and how did you deal with it?
Well, so I was in my office. It really physically made me sick. It just hurt my body. The next day I called a meeting of all the leadership team. Maybe 6 people. 2 of them were out of state, so they were on a conference call with me. Right before it, I took an Ambien instead of a Xanax, and I didn't know it.
Oh, no.
And the next 3 hours were downright comical. Although I don't remember very much about him at all. And I didn't figure it out until the next day. So that's actually how the book starts. I took an Ambien in the office one day, not on purpose. I meant to take a Xanax. That's the opening line of the book.
I mean, what happened? Oh my gosh.
Well, they actually said that I stayed in it. I was on point. I was focused. And And then I came home. I went to dinner with my boyfriend at the time and his 2 Catholic priest uncles and his mother. We had a great dinner. I had 2 glasses of wine. I came home and took another Ambien, and I slept the sleep of the dead. I mean, the next morning I woke up and I was so rested. I was just so rested. And then I picked up my phone and I had a voicemail from one man that said, Hannah, I'm just calling to see if you're okay after yesterday. And then I got on email. I was like, why is he calling me? I got on email and checked email, and my mentor was like, hey, buddy, I'm just checking in on you. I was a little worried about you yesterday. And then this time I'm like, what are they talking about? You know?
I'm fine.
So I thought, well, I'm good. I'm all good, you know? And I sat down to do some work, and I reached back into my purse to get a pen out of my purse and pulled out the prescription bag for Xanax that was stapled shut. And I was like, wait a minute.
Oh my gosh.
How can that be stapled shut? I took one yesterday. And that's how I figured it out. I pulled out the bottle of Ambien and counted the pills. Thank God I'm off of Ambien now. I just got off of it like a month ago. So I was on it for 17 years.
Oh my gosh. And was that to help with all the chaos in the business and like just smooth out all the stuff that's going on? Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, I didn't take Xanax for 17 years. I took Ambien for 17 years. Yeah. But I couldn't sleep. You know, you lay down at night and everything settles down around you and your mind just won't stop. So even when things are good, the energy, you know, which is just another form of stress, or maybe stress is just another form of energy, I don't know. But there's so much of it. You have so much of it that you just can't stop your mind. And I couldn't sleep. So
what did you learn after that event then? Like what kind of precipitated after that?
What happened next was I had met a guy in my Vistage Roundtable group who had heard me whine about the business, because truly, I mean, I guess the other thing that was going on was that I was personally growing tired of the business. You know, by that time it had been almost 14 years, and one of the things that I observed over those 14 years is that we kept solving the same problems over and over again for different clients. And, you know, you could only do that for so long without just going, you know, I don't want to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, I feel like everybody has their limit. You know, everybody has their limit of talent, their limit of patience, and also everybody, you know, has a need for change. And I was reaching that. And I could just tell that I wasn't as enthusiastic about the business as I had been. I was close to, let's say I'm almost 60 now. So I was, you know, in my mid 50s, and I was thinking about money differently. I was thinking about investment in the business differently. I was more in touch with the risks of a business. And so I wasn't so willing to continue to back the financing that it required, mm-hmm. or to commit, you know, big salaries to people who I knew would be there 18 months and then they'd be gone. It's just that the realities of the churn in the business made me feel differently about my level of commitment to the business. And so when I met this guy in Vistage Roundtable Group, he knew of an agency that had been looking for our skill set to either build it personally, you know, internally, which most traditional agencies are not good at that. Most of them fail at it a number of times because they can't keep the talent either. So the talent's most likely more willing to stay in digital, in a pure play digital agency, than they are as just a little subset of a traditional agency. Mm-hmm. But they still won't stay very long. So anyway, he knew this man who had started the traditional agency and was also leaving the agency through a management buyout. And he said, they need what you have. And I know it because he tells me about it all the time. So he introduced us. That man brought in the new president and CEO of the company. And she and I met a couple months later, and then we were kind of off to the races. So the opportunity came up, you know, right at the time that I was dealing with the most pain and the most disappointment in the business.
Well, and I want to unpack that for a second, Hannah, because, like, you know, well, before maybe we go down that route, you had mentioned in your article that you had talked to your attorney a couple times. Mm-hmm. So, like, yeah, was there a couple in that whole kind of time sequence? Like, there was a couple other things that not only just the burnout from the business and all the churn, but was there maybe explain a little bit about these conversations that started to help you
Sure.
look at business differently?
Sure. Yeah, that was about the time that we moved into the new office. And it was a burning question because I had been an EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, for 7 or 8 years, and I was in Vistage for a year or so. And that question, there's a lot of pressure on the owner of a business to know what your exit plan is. If you're in any kind of mentorship group, that's what they talk about most of the time. It's what's your exit strategy? And I'll be like, I don't have one. I love my business, And then, other business owners talk about golden handcuffs and, ensuring the ongoing operations of the business if something happens to you. And, I just sort of set out to get the answers to those questions. And I was thinking, what should I do next? I have a good leadership team. We've got this beautiful office space. We've been in business by that time about 12 years. We had a great name. And, we had mostly good client relationships, even the ones we lost. And so I was like, this is something I need to focus on. So the box I haven't checked is, what is the retention plan? What is the succession plan? What do I need to do to protect the business? And that's why I called my attorney, Tommy, and asked him to come over and talk to me about that. And then he had this absolutely game-changing conversation with me. I mean, absolutely a game changer for me.
What was the substance of the conversation?
Well, I had brought him there to talk about succession planning, and he started off the conversation by saying, let me just ask one question. Why would you want to do anything at all? And I thought that was a crazy question. It's like, are you an attorney? Don't you know anything? And I said, well, obviously, if something happens to me, I want the business to be able to continue. I want the business to have enough money to reorganize and take care of the clients and kind of get their act together and so that it can survive. And he goes, why? You're dead. And I literally leaned forward and said to him, tell me more about that.
Death or the situation?
Like, tell me more. And he said, I don't want to insult you. You've built a nice business, but quite frankly, it's not the Frist Foundation. It's not Ingram Industries. Those are two very big families here who have really put a lot of money into Nashville and big, important companies. He said, it's not that kind of company. So what would happen if something happened to you is that your clients would find a new agency within a couple of weeks, and all of your employees would find a job sooner than that. So what you really want to think about is what you want to do for your family. And I was like, no, that's all taken care of. They said, okay, well then maybe a nonprofit, or maybe you just want to think about how you want to spend the last third of your life. And I had never disconnected myself from the business like I did in that moment, because I thought the business is successful. It's my responsibility to keep the business going. And I had never disconnected from it enough to look at it as an asset that I had built, that I could do with what I wanted to. It very much defined me. And it had given me a platform in the city where I had some of the most fun of my life. It's just fun to create something. And it's more fun to create something that's successful. So I had never separated myself from it at all until that conversation. And that was the start of it. I said, thank you very much.
Yeah. Why do you think, Hannah, that most owners are like that and don't think about it like that?
It might be the type of person that actually is willing to take on business ownership. It might not be that the business does it to them. It might be that that's just who they are. So one of our core values at Paramore was personal responsibility. That was the most defining core value in the company. If you didn't have personal responsibility, you just didn't work out very well there. And it's surprising, but there's a lot of people out there who don't. And so I think that, if you don't have that as a business owner, then you're not willing to risk everything that you have to risk. And I don't just mean money. Mm-hmm. I mean that you risk all of your relationships because you spend so much time on the business. Mm-hmm. You put aside hobbies and anything else that you want to do. You don't even think about those things anymore because you don't have time to think about them anymore. And so you have this high level of personal responsibility to the business. And I think that is probably a common trait among entrepreneurs.
Well, and it's interesting too. I agree with you. And there's, more and more studies out there with that, which it's just like because that's what we went through, right? I mean, you're not thinking about selling until all of a sudden it's done. And you're like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about like with all my experience now in the last 5 years with private equity and all these, like, I mean, these are institutional, they get value and like asset creation, value creation, which is just totally looking at companies differently. And, you have this identity that's tied into the company, and to be able to like, as you're working yourself out of the business, like you keep saying shedding, like to somehow
Mm-hmm.
gotta be a way to like interject this into a like, so there's a book called Halftime Institute where you have like this, the overlapping S curve where you can actually like figure this stuff out without having to make dramatic changes. You know what I mean? Where like, it's not after you've sold, or it's not after you got into burnout. Cause I see it very similar. And it kind of goes back to when you described that the process of the opportunity came right when you're the most burnt out. I interviewed a guy, and he's a successful entrepreneur. He goes, it's all of a sudden you wake up one day and you go from loving it to you feel like there's a noose around your neck. And then that, like,
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's exactly the way I felt. For years, I couldn't wait for Monday morning to get here. I mean, we had Monday morning production meeting, and we started off with gospel music. I'd shake everybody's hand when they came in the door and thank them for coming. All of my employees, and we ran it like a radio remote, a cheer session. It was just great. And we got the week kicked off. I hated the minor holidays. I didn't even like Christmas very much. So I didn't like the major holidays, because I'm like, why do you need 3 days? Why do you need 3 days?
yeah,
Because we've got work to do. I couldn't understand it. I just couldn't. And then all of a sudden it was hard for me to get in there. And every time we would hire somebody, and I loved the staff, I really did love the staff for so long. And then it got to the place where I would look at them and I'd be like, you're a 12-monther. Yeah, maybe you're 18, but that one over there, she's 6 months and she's out,
Mm-hmm.
And so you stop investing emotionally in your staff when you realize that you're going to lose them. And even in the clients, it's the same thing. You start off, you get jaded. I mean, you just get jaded, and then you lose your energy. And I really began to feel like I was the limiting factor in my business at the end,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't have what I had for that company. And that somebody could lead that company out of the situation we were in, having just lost 2 big clients, but it just didn't feel like it was me.
It's so crazy too, because like I think going back to your point about like it's the type of person that starts a business that they don't think about this ahead of time a little bit, where like, you're when you're an entrepreneur, because I'm twice over, right, in the family business. I'm doing it now, right? I'll tell you what, I'll take
Mm-hmm.
a cash flow stream versus a startup all day long. I mean, consulting is in what we've been building is probably harder, but you put everything in there, but then all of a sudden, the ability to disconnect and like to look at it differently, I think is just, I'm trying to think of how to loop that back around, it's just so challenging, because you do what you want and you take crazy risks to do what you want and have control,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you're like, screw it,
Mm-hmm.
mortgage the house. It's like, I'd rather do that than work for someone. I mean, I lasted at our buyer for 2 months. It's just like, and
Yeah.
now I can't do it. And like, and that to that point is, so then all of a sudden, like if someone said, hey, Hannah, what's your plan? What's your plan? It's like, well, this is my plan. But then all of a sudden, when you have that emotional discomfort, it's like, I got to pivot.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, this kind of loops back to your specific tipping point, where it could be potentially in your biggest point of pain and hurt, which is directly correlated to the value of your company too. And it's,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
so
It was just a hard time.
well, and like, is there anything that like someone could have done to you to help you shake you out of that, to say, okay, well, there's a way to like and to view this as an asset while it's still yours? Or is it too difficult because there's so much personal, involvement in it for the 16 years, whatever that you owned it?
Yeah. I think for me, it was too late. I feel like, though, that if I had known a few things about maybe 6 or 8 years earlier, that I could have set it up so that that wasn't my only option, so that I could have cut back the time that I spent on the business, maybe moved to a chairman role and been available, but not, and still have a residual income, from the company for years. I feel like I could have done that if I had made a couple of big decisions a few years earlier. But I think the time was past for me to take on an equity partner, or financially restructure. I mean, there was nothing wrong with the financial structure of the business. We were still making money. We just weren't making as much. And I didn't have the heart for it anymore. I just think it was probably too late for me.
So walk us through what happened with the first meeting, and the kind of the whole sale process. Like, what was your Vistage, I don't know if it was a chair member met, introduced you, and now you said you're off to the races. So what did the races look like?
Yeah. So we met and started talking about ways to help each other grow our businesses, and they needed the talent that we had. We had also wanted to broaden our talents into more traditional. So it looked like it was a good opportunity to do that. And we started off with a strategic partnership. We did a little bit of work together, but it was not long, just a matter of months before we both knew that to do anything significant, they were going to have to buy us. Mm-hmm. There's just issues with agencies partnering. You just don't get the best out of a partnership,
Yeah, you're like
in the agency environment.
Yeah, same thing with a lot of stuff. You're trying to chase them down, do the same level of quality that you would have, and all that kind of stuff, and it just you're chasing each other. It's
not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have
then it went fast.
Did you know what the company was worth? Was there industry standards? Did you have any kind of understanding of how much money was going to go into your bank account, what the company was worth, how to do any of that stuff? Or did it just, they call it the deal train? Did the deal train take off and you were learning on the fly?
No, I had done some work over the previous couple of years after that conversation with my attorney, which happened about a year and a half before, and a little bit before. It was several years before we had been approached by somebody out of Atlanta, and that's when it didn't work out. And that's when I learned what the conversations would be like, and I knew that there was a formula. So, we would get, I think all of the mergers and acquisitions companies, I think they have the same database on the same timing, because every 3 months I'd get the same phone calls from 3 or 4 different private equity companies saying, we've got a buyer for your business in your area and call us. And so then we would go through the same conversation. I learned the conversations. Here's what my revenue is. What's the likelihood of getting this deal done? Because I knew that, unless you had senior or national level clients and a certain amount of revenue, then the deal price wouldn't be big enough to make it worth it. Right?
Did you know
it had to be a strategic buyer?
I got it. Okay, that was what I was going to ask. So, because the different, a lot of people, and I just did an interview about this, strategic versus financial. The difference is, my story kind of is one of the examples too. It's completely different. Sometimes it's not even based on that cash flow number. It's strategic synergies. So you had already run the kind of comparison, which is why you weren't picking up those phone calls.
Yeah, for sure. It wasn't worth it to me. So, and those deals don't get done. Those are blind cold calls. They just don't get done. But these folks were really interested. They were true to their word. They, we walked through the deal process together. I did not hire a broker to do it for me. We negotiated together. And, I think it ended up being good for both parties. We actually, by the time we closed the deal, we did our due diligence and closed it. By the time we signed the letter of intent, we did our due diligence and we closed it 60 days later. So,
no kidding.
No kidding.
Did you have an M&A attorney or CPA or anybody sitting next to you that was kind of helping you, or was it just you knew the business so well and you're just let's get this done, or how? That's risky.
No, I did have a team. I had an attorney and I had a CPA, and they were extremely helpful, through the process. But, I had the direct conversations with the buyer. It wasn't like we weren't represented by somebody else.
Do you have any regrets about not having a formal process and getting other buyers involved?
I do think that the auction kind of idea, or offering memorandum kind of idea where you create more demand for your company. Obviously that feels like it would be a good idea. I don't know in my space whether it was really possible to do that or not. And I really wasn't willing to risk the time that it takes to get through that process without there being a real buyer already there. So in my case, it worked out probably in the best way possible that, I didn't have to go through the what ifs of putting it out to market and see if anybody bites.
What was it like for you at closing?
It was one of the hardest days of my life.
How come?
It really, really was. I almost pulled the plug twice.
Really? Well, what led to that?
Well, just that the pain of having to, I think that you don't know what's on the other side of that announcement. Okay? You don't know how people are going to respond to you. You have to tell your staff. It's hard to tell your staff. Even though there was exciting news in it also, I knew that they were going to feel a loss. And you don't know what's going to happen on the other side, and you're not in control. And you as the owner have been in control for all of those years. But after you let that out, you're no longer in control. And that is such a big fear.
What do you think define control for you?
I think control for me was deciding what kind of company we were going to be, whether we were going to let something become a big deal, really bother us, or be able to manage through it. I think it was being able to make quick decisions and live up to our word, almost no matter what. And we had to do that a number of times. I mean, there were many times that we did not make money on a deal, but we delivered what we said we would deliver. And that is not something that you can do when you don't own the company. But I could make those decisions that were values-based decisions. And I'm not saying that my owner is not values-based, because they definitely are. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that small companies move fast. And because we move fast, we do so much business in such compressed amounts of time. And you make decisions because of a set of core values that you have established and trained through your company. And so decision-making comes fast. And you don't have layers to work through. You don't have to get permission. You can just do the right thing. And you don't know what's going to happen to that. When you become a part of something else, all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of other people to consider. There's a different brand and a different set of sensibilities and a different set of sensitivities and all those things you're stepping into that you haven't had to deal with for years.
What was it like for you? I mean, after closing and having that integration process?
Well, it was hard. I mean, you don't know where to stop as the person who owns the business, started the business, called the shots. You don't know where to stop with your input, with your work. It's just you're an employee then, and you're not necessarily in the decision-making seat anymore. So, it's tough to figure out what to do with your time and how to communicate, and always think that more is going to be expected, and because you're used to that. So you're just like being in a foreign country,
It's a really good way to put it. What I called it phantom anxiety. It's like, what am I supposed to be doing right now?
Exactly. The indignities. They suffer so many indignities on you as and I don't understand that. It's the thing that I think really is the most baffling of the whole scenario, is that they don't want you when they're done, even though you owned it and built it, and everything is about you.
It's yeah. So after you closed, what was it like with the integration as you were, all those things that you discussed, from control to your baby, your decisions, your clients, all that stuff? What was it like after you started handing off the reins to someone else?
Yeah. Well, personally, it's painful and confusing. I mean, you don't really know. You've never been in this situation before. So it's hard to know where your responsibilities, or to relearn where your responsibilities stop. That's a tough thing to learn. And then also it gets better in time. But
and I lasted 60 days, like I said. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, and it's, when's the last time before that then you had to work within constraints and in a box? I mean, that's the problem with most entrepreneurs.
Oh my God.
Right.
Yeah, it had literally been 20 years because the 5 years that I was in digital before I started my agency, it was pretty freewheeling and I was in good positions. Yeah. So I hadn't thought about that, but it had probably been 20 years.
Yeah, Hannah, this is called a PTO request form. Can you please do this in your expenses?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And the expense process, and wanting me to, I don't know, all the receipts, and I couldn't take people to lunch, and it's just so bizarre. You just haven't been in that situation for a long time, so
What was it like as you were rebuilding your identity? I mean, I know it's still fresh, so I don't know if you're like still doing stuff. I mean, because this is like Bo Burlingham. I don't know if you read his book called Finish Big. It's a fantastic book that
Mm-hmm.
I read it after we sold too. So you're gonna probably think about it and go, oh, yep. But it's about like what do owners want, who they are, what they want from their business, and why is what kind of defines a successful exit, because they understand all this before
Yeah.
they sell, which is hence the name of the podcast, Life After Business. Is like, how have you, has it been easy, hard? Or what have you done that has helped you as you're, watching your kind of baby drift off and you're trying to like
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah. It's interesting process. So one of my friends who had bought and started and sold a number of businesses, I talked to him right before the close, like the night before the closing. And he said, we closed on November 30th, and he said, listen, congratulations, and take the month of December off. Nobody does any work in December anyway. Get your head around January, and just realize that it's going to take you 6 months to realize that you actually sold your business. And he was exactly right, because it was about 6 months later that somebody quit, and I was like, somebody quit. All right. And that used to drive me crazy if we lost key people. But I was like, not my problem. And that's when I realized that I had crossed over. It took a good 6 months or more. And I stayed in the office for 6 months after that. The good thing is that I did not have a vision of my next step professionally, at the time that I sold, but I did have a vision of my next step personally. And that helped me a lot. So I had met Bill, and he's my husband, and we got married the same year that I sold my business. We got married in April. I sold my business in November. So literally from about the time we got married, we were already starting, conversations about the acquisition. And so the timing was just unbelievable. So he is in the PGA. He's a teaching pro, and he has goals and visions of playing more and more nationally and internationally, and making tour events and that kind of thing. And golf had become a very important hobby to me even before he and I started dating. So I really just had this yearning to spend more time there. And so even though, it's not my paid job, I do spend a lot of time helping my husband in his career, and we get to travel a lot. So that was the carrot that was out there for me. Is that I could have more control of my personal time. I could spend time building something with my husband. And, I knew I wanted to write more, which is what I've just really started spending time on just in the last few months. So that's the short stories that are on my website are the product of that. They are hopefully helpful business and life lessons that I've learned through the years. And then I'm working on this book. So you really can't do that while you're running a business either,
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like I was being called to something else, although the big something else isn't specific to me. It wasn't specific then. So it was really a leap of faith on that part, because I am a busy person. I like to be busy. I like to work. And I don't feel like I'm finished, but I don't know what the next big thing is, except for writing.
It's interesting, Hannah, because there was this woman that I interviewed that had a very successful company, and she said, because she similar stories, and she goes, I miss capitalism as managing and seeing a balance sheet and my reward of how I did. And so like, there's this level of, whether it's the feedback that you get, because I think are you familiar with the state of flow at all? There's this.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think that entrepreneurs live in the state of flow like 95% of the time, which makes it addicting, because you're getting immediate feedback on how you're doing. You're constantly pressing your personal challenges, and you're growing constantly. And to get that feeling outside of business is very difficult. And I don't know if
It is difficult.
if there's a way that, if the writing, or if it's just something where you're kind of leaving that open for, new interesting opportunities that come by.
Yeah, I mean, if I had another idea, I'm not a serial entrepreneur, by the way. I only had one idea. I started that business with one idea. The idea was the same, but when I ended it, it was when I started it. It did expand, but you know what I mean. It was the same basic idea, and I don't have another idea yet. If I did, I would do it. If there is another opportunity, I probably would, but I don't have it. So we'll tell you that the thing that does give you that state of flow outside of business is golf. And I'm sure there are other hobbies, other pastimes that can give you that same thing. But for me, there's a real sense of accomplishment, in seeing your game improve and committing yourself to that. And, it does not have any money attached to it for me, except outgoing money. Like money, it costs me money. I don't make any money on it.
That's another thing to get used to, right? Is not having a stream of income all the time.
Yeah, that's something to get used to. It really is.
If you were, as we're wrapping up here, Hannah, if you were to go back to yourself and when you had mentioned that if 6 to 8 years prior, you would have gone through some work. If you're talking to yourself 6 to 8 years before you kind of got burnt out, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, yeah, that's good. Good question. So the first one would be to find your number two person. Really find somebody who wants to take the business, who wants to become the new owner of the business or the new CEO. To find your number two. I did not have my number two. And the second one would be to take more time off from the business. I really yearned in the last 2 or 3 years that I was there, I yearned for a sabbatical, like a good, serious, 3 to 6 month sabbatical, so that I could get re-energized for the business, so that I could spend some time, researching some things, resting, but also looking for the next opportunity to keep the business interesting for myself. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of one of the other things is that you have to find a way to keep that business interesting for yourself, or eventually you won't do the right thing for the business. I think that, understanding now that I am not my business is not my life. I wish that I had put more time into developing hobbies earlier that would have rounded me out a little bit, and that might have helped with the burnout too. Another thing that I see in young entrepreneurs is that they have this guilt complex for treating themselves differently than they treat their staff. So they feel like they have to work the same hours, the same level of accountability, and not claim kind of the ground that they really are standing on, which is they're the top. And so there's this just constant struggle with asking for the amount of help and building an organization that supports them. It's just a constant struggle with it. There's guilt associated with it. And I maintain that if the CEO loses confidence in the business, it's over. I mean, CEO confidence is the most important thing to keeping a team together, to closing business, to getting the partners that you need, to getting the financing that you need. It's the single most important thing is the confidence of the CEO. When you lose that confidence because you burned out, because you don't have a balanced life, because you don't have the right number two in your company, because you haven't put the support around yourself to keep you engaged and excited, then you will lose confidence.
So well said, Hannah. And I think about what I went through, because over the course of my, period there, it was we were selling, we're not selling, we're selling, we're not selling. And I was the number two running everything. And then it's a mind, whiplash. And if you're not passionate about it because of all the hoorah you have to do to get through all the shit, if you don't have passion, then you can't get through it. It's physically impossible. It's
yeah. The place could burn down behind you and you wouldn't throw a bucket of water on it.
Yeah, that's a quote. I love it. If the listeners, I like it. It's so true. If our listeners want to get more information about you, your upcoming book, the tidbits of the life lessons you said, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would love it. HannahParamore.com. It's HannahParamore.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. So I'm super easy to find. And I would love for people to read the things that I've written. I would love comments. I'm literally, genuinely looking for comments that will help make the writing better. I'm not looking for people to flatter me. I have plenty of people to flatter me. My husband is wonderful at that.
That's awesome.
I want the truth.
Yeah, and people should read it, because the more that people digest stuff like this, the better. So, Hannah, it's been an absolute blast having you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for inviting me. It was fun to talk to you. It makes me want to go back to work.
Careful what you wish for.